We haven't talked about the vaccine debate here on SciShow because there is no debate to have. Vaccines don't cause autism, and they save millions of lives every year.
My goal in this video is to introduce you to the debate that doesn't exist. I'm not a doctor, but I've been reading through the medical literature and research on this subject for years. It's very expansive. So I'm only going to look at one aspect, one question many vaccine-hesitant parents have. Is the aluminum used in vaccine adjuvants safe? Aluminum in its soluble form is ubiquitous to our environment. It's in the soil, in our water, in our food, in our cosmetics, in our medicines, and it's a known neurotoxin. Its free ion, Al3+, is highly biologically reactive and uniquely equipped to do damage to essential cellular neuronal biochemistry. It is linked to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, impaired renal function, muscle weakness, seizures, speech problems, and so on. Amazingly, out of all vaccine ingredients, only one has been studied for safety: thimerosal, a mercury preservative. This paper states, and I quote, "According to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, safety assessments for vaccines have often not included appropriate toxicity studies because vaccines have not been viewed as inherently toxic." So vaccine ingredients and health outcomes have not actually been properly studied due to the fact that vaccines and their ingredients are simply assumed to be safe. It's a bit of circular reasoning going on here. We don't need to study and test these ingredients because we've used them for years. And we've used them for years because they're assumed safe in the amounts we're using. I question this, and so do many doctors and scientists. As I was researching all of this the last few years, I came across a site called Vaccine Papers, vaccinepapers.org, and I was very impressed by the work that an anonymous researcher had done in collecting and analyzing some of the most relevant scientific data. So I don't know who to give the credit to, but many of the arguments and studies I'm now going to present here, I culled from his or her collected material and analyses. Aluminum has been used in vaccines since the 1930s. It's an adjuvant, commonly alhydrogel, used as an immune stimulator. In fact, what it does is it irritates the immune system a little bit to provoke a response so that the body will start producing antibodies to whatever it is the patient is being immunized to. What we're told is that we don't need to worry about the aluminum in vaccines because the body is going to excrete it quickly. The Oxford Vaccine Group states, after vaccination, there is a temporary increase in the amount of aluminum in the body, but this is not a lasting effect. The body gets rid of most of the aluminum in just a few days. There is no evidence that this causes any risk to babies and children. When it comes to the aluminum that we ingest from our food, 99.7% passes straight through our gut and is eliminated in feces. The other 0.3% is absorbed, carried into the bloodstream, and pretty quickly passes on through our urine. Most of it's gone within 24 hours. This is how the body protects us from heavy metal toxicity. This second chart from vaccine papers shows the way that vaccine advocates assumed excretion of aluminum from vaccine adjuvants happened. They thought it worked the same way as ingested aluminum. They believed that if you inject the aluminum into tissue, it will immediately dissolve into Al3+ particles, just like the soluble type of aluminum we ingest from our foods, and then be carried by the blood to the kidneys, which can then excrete it. But here's the problem. Water-soluble Al3 from aluminum lactate or aluminum chloride, which we ingest, does not behave the same way as the insoluble solid nanoparticle form of aluminum hydroxide, aluminum phosphate, or aluminum sulfate that is used in adjuvants. Because of the low solubility, most of the aluminum from adjuvants persists in the body, studies show, for a minimum of months and likely even years. A study was done to see how long it took for rabbits to excrete a radio-labeled aluminum adjuvant after injection. The radioactivity allowed them to take accurate measurements of content in the urine, blood, and tissues. After 28 days, they were dissected. The researchers found that only 6% of the aluminum hydroxide, or 22% of the aluminum phosphate adjuvant, had been eliminated from their bodies. The levels of aluminum in their blood the levels of aluminum in their blood and urine mostly remained close to normal during this study because they weren't excreting very much. The adjuvant was detected in the brains, kidney, spleen, liver, lymph nodes, and heart. That's where the aluminum had traveled. It had gone to the organs and brain. In a study from 2015, they found that nanoparticles from aluminum adjuvant were still in organs and tissues of mice up to 270 days after injection. The authors stated, "The present study confirms that alum is extremely biopersistent and that alum, that's aluminum adjuvant, biopersistence can be observed in both the injected muscle and distant organs, including DLNs, that's draining lymph nodes, and spleen. Regarding the strong immunostimulatory effects of alum, long-term biopersistence of alum in lymphoid organs is clearly undesirable and may cast doubts on the exact level of long-term safety of alum-adjuvanted vaccines." In another study the next year by the same researchers, 1.3% of the total injected aluminum had made it into the brains of mice after 6 months. The MOVSAS study done in 2013 with infants showed that aluminum levels in their blood and urine hardly changed after vaccination. They tested them the day before and then the day after vaccination. The researchers said they were reassured to find no significant rise in serum aluminum levels after vaccination. But did they stop to consider what that means? It means the aluminum wasn't leaving the body. That should be concerning, not reassuring. Where was the aluminum? So this chart on the Vaccine Papers site better illustrates what actually happens when the aluminum enters the body. As you can see, only a tiny bit is immediately excreted, and the rest persists for an undetermined length of time, only very slowly dissolving into Al3+ particles. The dose makes the poison rule of classical chemical toxicity appears overly simplistic where it concerns aluminum adjuvants. Dr. Chris Exley, who has a PhD in the ecotoxicology of aluminum, has researched the subject for decades. He did not at first believe that there was any correlation between aluminum in vaccines and autism. But what he found over the course of his research changed his mind.
So we won't get too much deeper into Alzheimer's, except that obviously you came to a very strong conclusion that there was a strong connection between aluminum and
Well, I came to the conclusion that no aluminium, no Alzheimer's.
no aluminum, no
In the
Alzheimer's.
brain.
Wow. So then you decide to look at autism. You said that you were skeptical, that you didn't see that.
You know, as a scientist, you clearly read the literature, stuff that other people produce. There were a number of papers making the suggestions. I wasn't convinced neither by the quality of the papers and the research, but even then I have to think back, so what is the mechanism? That's what I learned just working on fish. What is the mechanism? You must have a mechanism as well as just something being there.
Right.
And I couldn't think of the mechanism. But by going to the brain tissue, it would at least give us an opportunity to make the first major step. Either we find no aluminium beyond the method blank type value in the brain tissue of people with a diagnosis of autism, or we find some aluminium, or we find a lot of aluminium.
What'd you find?
We found a lot of aluminium. We found a scary amount of aluminium.
Parents are not only justified in asking questions, they have a responsibility to do so. Don't outsource your thinking to others, not even experts. Make your own informed choices for yourself and your family.